Ladies and gentlemen, I want to start by asking you a simple question. Why do so many goals fail? We set New Year's resolutions. We make vision boards. We write lists, download apps, read books. And yet, months later, we're in the same place, frustrated, burned out, wondering why it didn't work. I've been there too, but here's what I've learned. It's not about setting more goals. It's about setting the right goals, the kind that actually work. Today, I want to share with you 6 powerful principles that can help you do exactly that. Because when you learn how to set the right kind of goal, you don't just make progress. You change your life. ChatGPT said, "Let me tell you something I learned early on. If you don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter what road you take." It sounds obvious, but it's amazing how many people are running full speed with no direction. They're working hard, putting in the hours, chasing something, but they haven't taken the time to define what that something actually is. That's why most goals fail before they even begin, because a goal without a clear vision behind it is like setting sail without a destination. You might be moving, but you're drifting, and drifting doesn't get you where you really want to go. Before you set any goals, before you think about deadlines, checklists, metrics, step back and ask yourself, what do I really want? Not what others expect, not what looks good on paper. What do you want to build? What kind of life do you want to live? What kind of person do you want to become? And I'll be honest with you, it's not always easy to answer those questions. Sometimes we've been moving so fast for so long that we forget to stop and check the map. But the people who achieve meaningful goals, goals that actually matter, they always start with a clear, compelling vision. Now, when I say vision, I don't mean some vague wish or a motivational quote on your wall. I mean something real, something vivid, something that you can see in your mind so clearly it almost feels like it already exists. The best visions are the ones that feel a little impossible at first, but they light something up inside you. They make you feel alive, and once you have that picture in your mind, the goal becomes a tool to help you get there. That's the difference. You're not setting goals for the sake of it. You're setting goals to serve a vision that inspires you. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine someone says, "I want to get in shape." That's not a vision. That's a wish, but if you ask why they want that, and you go deep enough, maybe you find out they want to feel strong. They want to wake up with energy. They want to be around to see their kids grow up. Now we're getting somewhere. That's a vision, that's real, and now every goal they set, whether it's running 3 times a week or changing their diet, is anchored to something that actually matters to them. That's the power of vision. It gives your goals context. It gives your effort meaning. Without it, even the most productive day can feel empty, but with it, even the smallest step feels like progress. Because you know it's part of something bigger. Now here's the beautiful part. You don't have to have everything figured out. You don't need a perfect plan from day one. You just need a direction, a picture in your mind that you believe in, a future that pulls you forward. The clearer that picture becomes, the more naturally everything starts to align. Your decisions become easier, your priorities sharpen. You start to say no to things that don't fit, and yes to things that do. Because now you're not just reacting, you're creating, you're building something intentionally, and don't worry if your vision evolves. It should. As you grow, your vision will grow with you. That's not failure, that's progress. The key is staying connected to it. Revisit it often, refine it, let it guide you, because when your vision is clear, motivation stops being a problem. You don't have to force yourself to move. You want to move. You wake up with direction, you go to bed knowing what you're working toward, and that feeling, that clarity, is one of the most powerful things you can ever give yourself. So if you're sitting there thinking about setting goals, don't start with the goals. Start with the vision. Ask yourself, what do I really want? What would make me excited to wake up every morning? What kind of impact do I want to have? And once you can see it, really see it, then you can start setting goals that matter. Once you have a clear vision, once you know what you're working toward, the next step is to get specific. I've seen so many brilliant people with amazing ideas get stuck, not because they weren't capable, but because their goals were too vague. They had energy, they had passion, but they were trying to hit a target they couldn't even see. That's the trap. A goal like "I want to be successful," or "I want to be better," Sounds good, but it doesn't mean anything until you define what that actually looks like. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And if you can't see it, you can't build toward it. Specificity creates clarity, and clarity creates momentum. When your goals are clear, you know exactly what to do next. You remove the guesswork. You take all that mental energy you used to waste on uncertainty and redirect it into action. You stop spinning your wheels and start making progress. Let's say your vision is to start your own business. That's a powerful vision, but it's not a goal yet. A goal would be launch a version of my product by October 15th. That's specific. That's measurable. You know what success looks like. You know the deadline. You can reverse engineer the steps. That's the kind of goal that leads to real movement. There's also something psychological that happens when we define our goals precisely. The moment you write down a specific, measurable target, your brain starts to look for ways to make it happen. You start to notice opportunities you would have otherwise missed. It's like tuning into a frequency you weren't even aware of before. But if the signal isn't clear, if the goal is fuzzy, your brain can't lock onto anything. So it just drifts. That's when frustration sets in. That's when people quit. Not because they're lazy, but because they're lost. And it's not just about what the goal is. It's also about how you measure it. If your goal is to get better at public speaking, how do you know when that's happening? Instead of saying, I want to be a better speaker, say, I want to deliver 3 presentations in the next 90 days and get at least one piece of positive feedback each time. Now you've got something you can track, something you can aim for, and more importantly, something you can feel good about when you achieve it. This is why deadlines matter. Deadlines give your goals weight. They create urgency, and that urgency leads to action. Without a deadline, a goal is just a wish. You can always push it off. You can always tell yourself, I'll start tomorrow. But when there's a date on the calendar, it becomes real. You can't ignore it. You either meet it or you don't. And that simple accountability, just that one layer of structure, can be the difference between doing something and doing nothing. Now, this doesn't mean you have to be rigid. Flexibility is important. Life happens. Things change. But structure doesn't trap you. It frees you. It gives you a way to measure progress. It gives you a sense of control. And when you feel in control, you stay engaged. You stay connected to your goal instead of drifting away from it. Some people get overwhelmed by the idea of setting specific goals because they're afraid of failing. They think, if I define it too clearly, then I'll know exactly when I've fallen short. But here's the truth. Not knowing doesn't protect you. It just delays you, and failure isn't the enemy. In fact, clear goals help you fail faster, and that's a good thing. Because when you know what didn't work, you can fix it. You can adapt. You can improve. But if your goal is vague and you fall short, you won't even know why. You'll just feel discouraged, and that discouragement starts to erode your motivation. You don't need 100 goals. You just need a few clear ones that are aligned with your vision, ones you can measure, ones you can track. That's how real progress happens. Not all at once, but step by step, milestone by milestone. And each time you hit one, something changes in you. You build trust with yourself. You start to believe that maybe, just maybe, you can actually do this, and that belief is everything. You can have the clearest vision in the world. You can set the most specific, measurable goals. But if those goals don't mean anything to you personally, if they're not rooted in what you value, then eventually you'll let them go. You'll burn out or drift or talk yourself out of it. And you won't even know why. It's not because you're not motivated. It's because you were chasing something that didn't belong to you in the first place. We live in a world where it's easy to absorb everyone else's definition of success. Social media, friends, parents, society, they all tell us what we should want. We start chasing titles, money, followers, achievements, not because they matter to us, but because they're visible, because they're popular, because they're easy to measure. And here's the danger. Those goals can still get you results. You might climb the ladder. You might hit the target. But you'll get to the top and realize you're on the wrong building. That's why alignment matters. Your goals have to line up with your values, not someone else's. They have to connect with the things that matter to you when no one's watching. Otherwise, you won't stay with them. Not when it gets hard. And it will get hard. There's no way around that. The difference between the people who keep going and the ones who quit isn't talent. It's alignment. When your goals are rooted in your values, they become an extension of who you are. You don't have to force yourself to stay motivated. It happens naturally, because now you're not just chasing a result. You're building a life that feels right. Think about this. If one of your core values is freedom, and you set a goal that boxes you into something rigid, you'll start to resist it, even if it looks impressive on the outside, even if everyone else tells you it's smart. You'll feel the friction. Something inside you will pull away. That's your values trying to speak to you. And if you ignore them for too long, you'll end up resenting the very thing you worked so hard to build. So how do you avoid that? How do you make sure your goals are aligned? You start by getting honest. Strip away the noise. Forget what looks good. Forget what other people expect. Ask yourself, what actually matters to me? What do I want more of in my life? Creativity, connection, impact, peace, challenge, and then look at your goals. Do they move you in that direction? Do they bring you closer to the kind of life you actually want? If they do, great. If not, adjust them. Don't be afraid to pivot. Don't be afraid to rewrite the plan, because a goal that's not aligned will always feel like a fight. But a goal that is aligned, it feels like flow. And alignment doesn't mean comfort. It doesn't mean easy. You can have goals that scare you and still be aligned. In fact, some of the most aligned goals will push you out of your comfort zone. But when they're rooted in your values, that stretch feels right. It's not just effort. It's meaningful effort. It fuels you even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. One of the best ways to check for alignment is to imagine achieving the goal. Picture it. You've done it. You've hit the mark. Now ask yourself, how does that feel? Are you proud? Are you fulfilled? Do you feel more connected to the kind of person you want to be? Or do you feel a little empty, a little disconnected? That feeling is your compass. Don't ignore it. And remember, values can evolve. What mattered to you 5 years ago might not matter today. That's okay. In fact, it's healthy. The key is to stay in conversation with yourself. Keep checking in. Keep asking, is this still mine? Because the moment your goals stop being yours, they stop working. When your goals are aligned with your values, something powerful happens. Discipline turns into devotion. Deadlines stop being pressure. They become purpose. You don't have to constantly push yourself because you're pulled by something deeper. You're not just working towards something. You're becoming someone. And that's the point. So if you want your goals to actually work, if you want them to last, make sure they're not just smart. Make sure they're true. Here's the thing about big goals. They're supposed to feel a little overwhelming. If they don't, they're probably not big enough. But overwhelm, if you're not careful, can turn into paralysis. You stare at this huge idea, this giant finish line way out in the distance, and you don't know where to start. So you don't start at all. You procrastinate, you tinker, you make plans, and then you revise those plans. And meanwhile, nothing's actually happening. The way out of that trap is simple. Break it down. You take that big, ambitious goal, the one that's connected to your vision and rooted in your values, and you start slicing it into smaller pieces, pieces you can act on, pieces that make the whole thing feel real and doable. Because when you focus only on the end result, you freeze. But when you shift your focus to the next step, just the next step, you move, and once you're moving, you're building momentum. And momentum is everything. Most people think motivation is what gets things done, but motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes. What you really need is motion, forward motion, even if it's small, especially if it's small. That's why breaking your goal into actionable steps is so powerful. You create a path, you create structure, you give yourself tiny wins along the way, and those wins build confidence, they build belief, and that belief fuels your progress. Let's say your goal is to write a book. That's a great goal. It's clear, it's meaningful, but it's also huge. You sit down at your desk and think, where do I even begin? But if you break that goal down into steps, outline the chapters, write 500 words a day, finish a draft in 90 days, it becomes manageable. You don't have to write a book. You just have to write a page, then another and another. Before you know it, the book's written. Not because you tackled the whole thing at once, but because you tackled one piece at a time. There's another benefit to breaking goals down. It helps you measure progress in a way that's encouraging. If the only thing you're aiming for is the finish line, you won't feel successful until you get there. And that can take weeks, months, even years. But if you break the journey into smaller milestones, you create checkpoints, places where you can pause, reflect, and say, I'm on track. I'm making progress. I'm doing this. That feeling is critical. It keeps you engaged. It keeps you connected to the process. Because goals that actually work aren't just about the outcome. They're about staying in the game long enough to reach the outcome. And people stay in the game when they feel like they're moving forward. Now, there's a temptation when you break things down to get lost in the planning, to turn every step into its own mini project. Don't overcomplicate it. The point isn't to build a second goal on top of the first one. The point is clarity, action, simplicity. Every step should lead directly to motion. Ask yourself, what's the smallest possible action I can take right now to move this forward? Then take that action, no delay, no debate, just do it, and don't be afraid to adjust the steps as you go. You're not carving these into stone. You're creating a living structure, something you can evolve as you learn. Because the truth is, you won't have all the answers up front. You'll figure things out along the way. But progress only happens when you give yourself permission to start before everything's perfect. To take one imperfect step, then the next, then the next. Some days that step will be big. Other days it might be tiny. That's okay. What matters is that you keep taking steps, because small steps, repeated consistently, create massive change over time. You won't always notice it in the moment, but when you look back, you'll see how far you've come. And you'll realize that the goal wasn't so big after all. It just needed to be broken down. So if you're staring at something that feels too big, too far, too complex, zoom in. Break it down, shrink the scope until it becomes clear, until it becomes doable, because once you know your next step, there's only one thing left to do. Take it. Let me tell you something that makes all the difference, and yet so many people overlook it. Tracking. Not in a rigid, robotic, spreadsheet kind of way, but in a real, honest, consistent way, because without tracking your progress, you're flying blind. You might feel like you're working hard. You might feel like you're doing a lot. But feelings lie. What doesn't lie is data. What doesn't lie is the evidence of what you've actually done. It's simple. If you want to improve something, you need to measure it. That's not a nice to have, it's a requirement. It doesn't matter whether your goal is personal, professional, creative, or health-related. If you're not measuring your actions, you're relying on memory, on assumptions, on gut feelings, and those will trick you every time. Because we tend to either overestimate our efforts or underestimate our progress. We forget what we've done, we forget how far we've come, but the numbers don't forget. The habit tracker doesn't forget. The journal doesn't forget. The system remembers, and that's where the power is. And I'm not just talking about keeping score. This isn't about punishing yourself when you miss a day or fall short. It's about clarity. It's about awareness. When you track your actions, you get a clear picture of what's working and what's not. You start to spot patterns. You see where you're consistent and where you're falling off, and that gives you something you can work with. You can course correct, you can refine, you can double down on what's working instead of wasting energy on what's not. There's another benefit to tracking that's just as important: momentum, progress, real, visible progress is one of the most powerful motivators there is. When you can look back and see the work you've put in, when you have proof that you're not just spinning your wheels, you start to trust the process, even if the results haven't shown up yet, even if the big win is still miles away. That visible track record becomes a kind of fuel. It reminds you that you're on the path, that you're moving forward, that you're building something. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't need fancy tools. A notebook works, a whiteboard works, a simple app works. What matters is that you do it, that you make it part of your routine. Set your goal, break it down into daily or weekly actions, and then check in. Did I do what I said I'd do? Did I show up today? Did I move the needle? And be honest with yourself, not harsh, honest. If you missed the mark, own it. Don't make excuses. Don't sugarcoat it. Just look at the data and ask what got in the way. What can I change? That kind of self-awareness is gold. It puts you back in control. It turns setbacks into feedback. And when you start treating your progress like a living system, something you observe, tweak, and improve, you stop reacting and start evolving. Now here's the part that most people miss. You don't just track the outcome. You track the behavior. Focus on what you can control. You can't always control how fast you lose weight, or how many people buy your product, or how many followers you gain. But you can control how many times you show up, how many hours you put in, how many reps you do. That's what you track. That's where the leverage is. Because when you focus only on the result, you set yourself up for frustration. You start tying your motivation to things that aren't fully in your hands. But when you track the inputs, the things you do, you stay empowered, you stay grounded in action, and over time, those actions compound. That's the secret. Not one big leap, but thousands of small, deliberate steps, measured, observed, improved, and don't forget to celebrate the progress. That's part of tracking, too. Look back at what you've accomplished, not just to check a box, but to build belief. To remind yourself that you're capable of doing hard things. To remind yourself that the effort is working, even if the reward hasn't fully arrived yet. Progress is happening, growth is happening, and you've got the record to prove it. So whatever your goal is, track it. Break it down, measure your actions, and stay honest. Not because you're trying to be perfect, but because you're trying to be real. Because you want to know, not guess, that you're moving in the right direction. No matter how well you plan your goals, no matter how aligned they are with your values, how clearly you break them down, or how consistently you track your progress, life is still going to throw curveballs. That's a guarantee. Things will shift. Circumstances will change. You'll make mistakes. You'll hit walls. And in those moments, the instinct is often to panic, to push harder, or worse, to give up entirely. But here's the truth most people don't want to admit. Goals aren't meant to stay rigid. They're meant to evolve with you. See, a goal isn't just a finish line. It's a living thing. It grows as you grow. And if you're doing it right, if you're learning, paying attention, and staying honest, then there will come a time when the original version of your goal no longer fits. Maybe you've outgrown it. Maybe new information changes the context. Maybe life threw something at you that changed your priorities. That's not failure, that's progress, that's movement, but only if you allow yourself to adapt. Adaptability doesn't mean abandoning your vision. It doesn't mean giving up at the first sign of discomfort. It means being willing to look at what's real, what's actually happening, not just what you hoped would happen, and then making smart, intentional adjustments. You can change your methods without changing your purpose. You can shift your timeline without giving up the dream. What matters is that you stay connected to the why, even if the how has to evolve. The problem is, a lot of people cling to the original plan as if changing it would be some kind of betrayal. They think if they have to pivot, they've failed. That's not how this works. Flexibility isn't weakness, it's intelligence. It's strength. It's the willingness to stay in motion, to keep moving forward, even if the path isn't what you expected. Stubbornness looks like commitment on the surface, but real commitment is dynamic. Real commitment adapts. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is stop, reassess, and make a better move. That doesn't mean you're indecisive. It means you're learning, you're staying aware. You're refusing to coast on autopilot. And here's the key. You can't do that if you're so attached to the original goal that you ignore what's actually working, or not working, in the real world. One of the most powerful habits you can build is regular reflection. Take time, weekly, monthly, quarterly, to ask yourself, is this still the right goal? Is this still the right path? What's changed since I started? What have I learned? What needs to shift? That kind of reflection keeps you honest. It keeps you responsive, and when you do that consistently, you stop reacting to change and start leading it. Now, there's a balance here. You don't want to become so flexible that you lose direction entirely. That's not adaptation. That's drifting. The anchor is your vision. The thing that doesn't change is the reason you set out in the first place. But everything else, the strategy, the pace, the tools, the route, that can all evolve. And it should, because if you're growing, your goals will need to grow with you. Sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come when you realize the old plan just isn't serving you anymore. You were doing everything right, but for the wrong version of yourself. You started chasing a goal when you were at one stage of your journey, and now you're somewhere else, somewhere wiser, somewhere clearer. In that moment, giving yourself permission to pivot isn't quitting. It's leading yourself forward, and don't let your ego get in the way. Just because you said you'd do something one way doesn't mean you have to keep doing it that way forever. You're allowed to get smarter. You're allowed to change your mind. The point of a goal is to create progress, not to trap you in a version of yourself that no longer fits. The strongest people I know aren't the ones who never waver. They're the ones who know when to shift gears, who trust themselves enough to say, this isn't it anymore, and that's okay. So when things change, and they will, don't freeze, don't cling to the past just because it's familiar. Pause, breathe, recenter, and ask yourself, what's the smartest move I can make now? Then make it. Let your goals bend without breaking. Let them grow as you grow. Because at the end of the day, goals at work aren't the ones that stay the same forever. They're the ones that keep evolving until they take you exactly where you need to go.